This is 10 blocks away. We'll make
You have undoubtedly run into the problem of having to reach for the remote to turn up the volume to hear dialogue adequately, just to rush and turn it down when the action starts popping off. Longtime DTS sound engineer Brian Slack explains why this happens, and we'll go over a few things you can do to help mitigate this when watching shows and movies at home. What's the deal with inaudible dialogue, but then action and music that's loud as heck? This has to do with the way audio is mixed from movies and shows. Movies in particular are mixed this way on purpose. You may have heard the term high dynamic range in regard to picture quality. This has to do with the TV's ability to reproduce wide color ranges and contrast ratios. Just like motion picture, sound is also mixed in high dynamic range specifically so a movie sounds good in a movie theater. Theaters provide quiet environments with their padded walls and sound insulation between auditoriums. HDR sound sounds good in a theater because of the environment and allows you to hear people whispering in a movie. Your ears aren't competing with things at home like the AC unit, the hum of the refrigerator, and hard walls and floors, among other things in your living room. High dynamic range sound is great in theaters and is exactly as the filmmakers intended you to hear a movie. Because of the ideal environment in theaters, audio engineers take advantage of them and use additional headroom on the audio spectrum to engross you in their content. This is why the lows sound really low and the highs are really loud.
You hear different frequencies at different levels. So something played back at 85 dB, like if you lower it 10 dB, it's not necessarily going to sound 75 dB. Like some frequencies might sound 68 dB and some frequencies might sound 77 dB, because as they come up and down, different frequencies feel louder to you. Okay. So what ends up happening in a movie theater is everything is designed to be playback at 85 decibels. So when we measure every movie theater, it's measured at 85 decibels, running pink noise. The reason they came up with that number is because most active conversations from what's called medium listening distance, your voice is about 85 dB. So if you were to just like put a SPL meter in front of your mouth and speak loudly, it's like you would like come out at about 85 dB so that an audience could hear you. So what they do is they try and mimic that in a movie theater. Okay, so everything's done at 85 dB, but then you have 20 dB of headroom over that. When they record it, they make sure that everything you get 20 dB louder than that. Once you get past 20 dB, there's nothing there. Okay, so that means that you have to be able to generate 105 dB, or roughly the sound of a jet engine taking off from like a couple of hundred feet. It's like pretty loud. And then you add up, like if you're listening to 5.1, you add 6 channels to that. Well, you got a lot of level coming out of your speakers. Now you go and you play that back on your home system. So now what ends up happening is you don't want to listen to the dialogue at 85 dB. That's pretty loud. Like, you wouldn't crank it up that loud in your living room so that you're listening to the dialogue up at this high level. Well, you're going to lower it down. Most people they find listen to their dialogue in their living room, if you're close up, somewhere between like 73 and 75 dB. So call it 10 dB lower. Well, now what ends up happening is you're down at this different threshold. So now the louder stuff, when you get it 20 dB hotter, now you've broken this threshold where the loudness is not equal to the same loudness that it was in the movie theater. That dynamic range feels louder when you lower it because now you're breaking this threshold from like 75 to 85 to 95 dB, as opposed to going from 85 to 95 to 105 dB. Honestly, like if you heard something at 100 dB and then heard something at 115 dB, you'd probably go, yeah, it's probably a little louder, but it's already so loud that like you're not noticing that difference. However, if you listen to something at 75 dB and then you raise it 10 dB, well, that's a huge difference. So now everything on small speakers and everything in your home just feels so much more dynamic coming out of smaller speakers and listening to it in a quiet environment and listening to it like at a lower level. That dynamic range of 25 dB is just feels louder. Now, if you were to go in and measure it using a spectrum analyzer or using an SPL meter, you would find that's exactly the same dynamics there in the movie theater. But to your brain and in that environment, it just feels like everything is so much louder. So now it's like you've got to raise the dialogue when it's lower because now your overall listening level is a little lower. So you're like, oh, I need to raise it up past 75 so I can hear the dialogue. But now everything gets real loud. So you got to lower it back down again so that the big loud stuff doesn't feel so dynamic. That is the entire point of doing a near field mix. That's why near field mixes, that's why people like that guy in the post you said, he's complaining because you can't get the theatrical mix. Well, they designed it that way. They do the new mixes so that they're designed not to be as dynamic, just for the reason you just asked.
The issue at home is that a lot of us want a different sound mix just for home viewing. There are several reasons this doesn't happen very often though. For one thing, it's the cost. Studios typically don't want to remix an audio track a second time because of the time and money associated with doing so. Another reason is the space required for storage. Whether your movie is streaming from a server or being played from a disc, a second audio mix for a movie would take up extra space, something that is already a premium. Another reason is that filmmakers don't want to change the mix because the theatrical mix is the way they intended the movie to sound and don't want to adjust it for artistic reasons. And finally, you have people who really enjoy the theatrical version of the movie. Going forward, Brian said a lot of studios are slowly starting to mix their audio tracks in a more narrow range of the audio spectrum since a lot of movies and shows are streamed at home these days. One way to help fix this is to enable night mode if you have it on your TV or audio receiver. Another way to fix this is getting a sound bar or sound system that has a center speaker. Most of the dialogue will come out of the center channel, and having a separate speaker dedicated to the task can make it easier to understand when people are talking on screen. If you already have a center speaker, try turning up the volume just for it a couple of decibels. Have you guys run into this issue before? How have you fixed it, or have you learned to live with it? Let me know in the comments below. This is Movie University, Education in Cinema.